Welcome back to Eldest Daughter, a podcast in discovery of what makes a cycle breaker. Per usual, we'll be dipping in to the identities, experiences, challenges, and gifts that go into becoming somebody who identifies the role that they want to live rather than the role that they were given. And today, I am joined by none other than Chrissy Rutherford, it girl herself.
Stop.
Chrissy is many things, is a multi-hyphenate everything, but she is a fashion and social media expert, brand consultant, writer, former editor, creative entrepreneur with 15 years of experience under her belt. More than that at this point?
Let's go. No, 15. is
Yeah,
good
I'm
at
like-
this point.
A vet if I've ever seen one. And you know what? As much respect that gets placed on your name, I feel like it's not enough for how much both behind the scenes and front facing work that you've done to transform the industry. And that's because I'm a seer. I got MRI eyes. I always know the girls that are creating impact, and you've always been one of them. I feel really grateful to witness you.
Oh my
Of
God,
course.
Stop.
Of course.
You know, I actually just made a video about this on TikTok because I'm like, I spent 10 years working in fashion publishing, and I'm like, there's so much that I have given that doesn't even have my name on it. No one would ever know
That's
that,
right.
you know, it was an idea I put forth or something
Right.
I produced.
You're
or,
creative.
you know, it's just because I did it for the good of the brand, of the company. Like I just wanted, you know,
Totally.
I wanted it to succeed. So
Yeah. And for the world that you want to see.
right. And so, you know, I think there's a point in your career where you don't really need the validation. You don't need the pat on the back. But at the same time, you're kind of like, well, if nobody knows, then like, fuck.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody knows that was me.
Exactly. Absolutely. Completely. And I think that like there's a little bit of, you know, negotiation that we do with ourselves as creatives in this industry where you have to decide like, is my journey one of personal identity? Like, is this a personal brand? Like, am I actually, no matter how much money's happened on the back end, like, is
Yeah.
it worth my time?
Yeah.
I think for me, I've had plenty of conversations with my spirit team, with my ancestors,
Mhm.
and they all said, "Bitch, we want you in front of the camera. We want to hear your voice. We don't give a fuck what you're doing back there." And so I
There you
have
go.
learned, you know what I'm saying? For the same reason, I feel like particularly around 3 years ago, I started to do a lot of consulting and back end social media work with
Yeah.
brands that became the best of their space.
Yep.
And again, it was a lot of like, oh, like that was me. And I don't really feel the need to take complete and total ownership, partially because brands are not people and they'll always fuck it up.
Yeah.
Like eventually they will
Truly.
do something that's so cancelable that I'll never want my name on it anyway. And it's happened
Yep.
with almost all of them.
Yep.
So it's like, to
I
some extent, I'm like,
know.
I'm so happy that they've had like a little kiss of me, a little kiss of Kendra. I got to like come
Right.
in, sprinkle my fairy dust and go away. But a
I
lot
love
of that
that.
was also like part of me working through the true alignment of being like, I know how to work. Like I've got Capricorn and Taurus placements. I know how to work.
Oh,
That's not my
oh.
problem.
You're speaking my language.
Right? Exactly. I'm like, that's not my problem. My problem is that it's not in total and complete alignment with my truth and my destiny. So not only are you an icon, but you're also what I believe to be a Taurus rising, a Pisces sun, and a Capricorn moon,
Yes. You're
based on what I've
correct.
read.
Yes.
And that's why I rock with you. That's why I fuck with you heavy. Is because I've got a Capricorn rising, Aquarius sun, and Taurus moon. So we've got some synergy. We're both dreamers and doers.
Yes.
Yeah, we're both
I
dreamers and
know.
doers, which
I
is a rare
know.
combination.
Absolutely.
I want to hear a little bit about your hero's journey. Tell the people about your hero's journey and kind of your experience in shifting from kind of a more structured and like I really kind of working for gatekeepers and being a gatekeeper at some point in
Yeah.
your journey and now really defining yourself for yourself. What has that been like?
Ooh, you know, it was my dream to work in fashion, and I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I just put like one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
And, you know, suddenly I found myself in my dream job at harpersbazaar.com. And I did a few things before that, but I spent almost 9 years there. So that's really, you know, where I feel like I've made the most impact, and that job had the most impact on me. And, you know, I loved that job so much. And it's so funny because I always say now that like I manifested that job before I even knew what manifestation was.
Yeah.
Because as I said, I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I just made it happen because I knew that that was the path for me. I knew
Totally.
it.
Right.
And it ended up being so beyond what I ever imagined it could be.
Yeah.
You know, like when I was growing up, I was like, oh yeah, I want to be, you know, one of the girls that picks the clothes that go in the magazine.
Right.
And
You wanted to play dress up.
and so that was the vision, but then what I got to the positive and sometimes the negative
Right.
is that I ended up writing and I styled and I
Mm.
hosted and I went on TV and talked about
Right.
trends and I was
You became a
producing shoots. Like
multi-hyphenate creative.
I ran our Instagram account. Like I
Yeah.
literally did everything. So it was nice in that I got to really like be in all the parts that helped make that site successful.
Mm.
And but I've known, and this I swear is my Capricorn moon, since I was in high school, I knew I meant to do great things with my life.
Absolutely.
Like there is no fucking question.
Right.
I knew that that was for me. And so I think while yes, Bazaar was my dream job, there, of course, as corporate America, there was a lot of politics and stuff that was starting to really
Totally.
drain my energy and like drag me down. And so again, it was like that little voice of like, you're meant for greater things than this.
Absolutely. Like this is you've reached the capacity limitation at which this like train's going to take you, right?
Yep,
It's like you've reached final destination here, and that
absolutely.
doesn't mean that the dream has stopped. The dream has kept going and
Correct.
transformed.
Yes.
I'm interested to hear I want to know a little bit about like childhood Chrissy. So I
Mm.
know you're an only child, right?
I'm not. A lot of people think that I am, but I'm not. I have two older brothers
Okay.
that are 10 and 11 years older than me.
Oh, so I'm so interested about
Yeah.
this because I am not the eldest child, but I am the eldest daughter.
Okay.
And that is why I was like interested to have you on,
Yeah.
depended on kind of your birth order and where you fell, because you give me very much eldest daughter vibes. Yeah.
Thanks.
So what are the ways in which you kind
Although
of
I'm not, I'm such a baby.
I love that.
I'm
But at the
such a
same time, you're so
baby.
responsible. It feels like you take on a lot
Yes.
of responsibility.
Yes. Cat moon.
Exactly. The cat moon. 100% completely. So like tell me a little bit about like childhood Chrissy and what she was like and where that knowing came from. And also like as a Pisces native, I'm
Mm.
curious about the stories that you were reading or consuming and what you identified with that made you feel like it was a part of your destiny.
Yeah. I was a very creative child. Like, when I actually wrote about this for my newsletter, about how I think a really important practice for sort of just thinking about your passions is looking back to who you were as a child and what you really loved. And
Totally.
I found a report card from it was either like first grade or I think it maybe third grade because I was probably writing then. And my teacher wrote, Chrissy is a very prolific writer,
Mhm.
which is like such a crazy thing to say about someone in elementary school. But I
Totally.
loved to write and I loved to draw. I remember doing like a cartoon class after school. I was also one of those kids that like the teacher selected me to like work on a little side project and I
Right.
wrote my own little book
Yeah.
and
Otherwise you get bored.
it like got bounded and it was just
That's
I don't
so
even remember what it was
sweet.
about, but
So you also
I know it
had
actually like makes me emotional
yeah,
just thinking
that's so
about it.
sweet.
Um
Because you had adults around you who were feeding into your like essential self.
yeah, I mean I can't really like remember whether like how much of that was sort of encouraged by my parents. My parents were working a lot. Like my parents are immigrants.
Right.
And so I think that was also the creative arts was probably also like an escape mechanism for me.
Mm.
And I was also a dancer. My mom put me in ballet class at, I think, 5 years old. And it
Mhm.
was something that I was really good at naturally, but I didn't necessarily love it.
Right.
But I continued to show up year after year until I started developing really bad anxiety. And then I had to
Mm.
quit because I just couldn't get on stage. That was a whole other thing.
Right.
But
And was that mostly performance anxiety?
it was like, I don't know, it was
Was
everything.
it like a somatic rejection to not wanting to do it?
No, no, because it wasn't the catalyst. It was like the fallout of
Right.
me having my first panic attack and suddenly just being afraid of like everything. Because
Mm.
I loved being on stage. I loved being in front of people. I was in my school chorus. I did school plays. I played the
Totally.
clarinet, the violin. Like I was
Totally.
definitely a performing arts child.
Yeah.
But after I had my first panic attack, it was like suddenly I was terrified of everything.
Right.
And I like just kind of became like insular and recluse and I had to,
Right. Of course. Yeah. I mean, I think that, you mentioned your Capricorn moon. I think specifically having experiences where you feel out of body and out of control.
yes,
Like I
it's so
remember
hard.
when I had my first panic attack in adulthood. I think I was maybe like 20. This was a few years ago, right before the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
Um, and it happened at work, which again, I'm a Capricorn rising, Capricorn Mars. So work to me, that's where I'm a superhero.
Yeah.
I have no problem showing up. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? And like that's when I show up my highest power.
Yeah.
And I also feel really safe there. And I realized that a lack of like emotional and physical safety had then infiltrated the most powerful part of my life, or what I
Yeah.
had deemed the most powerful part of my life. And that was really, it stripped me of a lot of confidence in that space. So I'm kind of curious about like today you share so much in your newsletter Forward Joy and also on all of your social media accounts about your experience with mental health. It is Mental Health Awareness Month,
It
which is gorgeous.
is. We love it.
Yeah, totally. And like specifically, I was reading a piece that you'd written in your newsletter where you talk about managing your like plane anxiety.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like to me, I associate you so much with travel.
I know.
Like in
I
like
know.
living your best life. And so like I'm just curious about kind of the tools and resources that you've kind of put into your toolkit to
Yeah.
help you show up for a life knowing that this thing has to be managed, that you know your panic attacks and anxiety and all of these things are a part of your existence.
Yeah. I mean, I had my first panic attack around like 11, 12. So I've been in and out of therapy since then. So I feel like I'm sort of a pro at managing it, but it doesn't
Right.
mean obviously that it doesn't happen and I don't get nervous or
Totally.
anxious. But therapy has helped me immensely, especially like
Mhm.
getting back on the plane because I had like almost a 4-year gap in my early 20s where I could not get on an airplane at all.
Mm.
Um,
Not even for work?
so the reason why I got back on the plane was because I got my first opportunity to travel for work. I
Wow.
had to make my mom come with me because I could not get on the plane by
Well,
my
period.
I had never flown by myself. I'd only flown
Totally.
with my parents before. And the experience was truly so agonizing for me
Mhm.
that like, I had that snap in my brain that was like, I don't want to put myself through this. So I have to make a conscious decision to work through
Totally.
this because I knew that was going to kind of just be the start of getting opportunities to travel for work. And literally by the following year, I got on the plane by myself
That is
for the first
actually
time.
really incredible. That's really incredible. That's a lot of work that goes into that.
Yeah. Xanax also helps. I got that
Period.
prescription.
Period. And don't be fearful of doing what you need. Some people have to buy their happiness. Some people have to take their happiness, and that's not a problem.
It's not. You know, I love Xanax.
Shouts out.
My doctor like highly monitors, how much
Totally.
I'm prescribed. And honestly, like I get what 30 in a prescription. I do not
Right.
go through all 30 in 1 year.
Totally. Yeah, I'm a well beauty cutie myself. Full Wellbutrin gang over here. And it's actually transformed my life. I did have a challenge with kind of accepting that help, that version
Yeah,
of help.
I know.
I have a challenge accepting help, period.
Yeah.
Right, right. But I think that like just I always felt like there was more work to be done and that there was like a softer version of work to be done once I started accepting the idea of soft healing.
Yeah.
And for some reason, that like kind of final, like, this is the hill I'm going to die on was like, I'm not going to take medication.
Yeah.
Did you have a similar experience? And like,
For sure.
what did
And
it take to just let you accept that reality?
so, for me, I kind of think of Xanax being a bit different because it's not something I need to take regularly. And
Totally.
obviously, Xanax is highly addictive for those who are listening and curious. But interesting, I had a conversation a few years ago with my general practitioner because there was a period of time where I think I was having a lot of anxiety, probably because I was unhappy at my job. And
Mm,
anxiety like does a number on my stomach. Like it's
right.
just not
Mental
good.
health is somatic. People forget
Right.
that mental health is
And
somatic.
we have
It's
a lot of nerve endings in our stomach. And so
mhm.
my doctor was like, I think you should think about going on antidepressants. And I was like, oh, no, 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 I don't need those. And I told her, I was like, listen, I've made it this far without medication. I don't think I need it.
Right.
And she was kind of like, it's always people like you who think, that they don't want the help because you
Right.
think you're so strong. But
Totally.
she was like, there's nothing wrong with it. You don't have to go on it forever. You just try
Right.
it out and see if it helps. In the end, I did not end up going on it. I left my job. And suddenly
Right.
things felt better. But
Sometimes the solution is to leave your job. I
yeah.
will say I have a certain kind of leave your job and leave your partner energy that people do not
What?
like. But I will always tell you, I'm like, oh, you have a mental health issue? Yeah, you should probably just leave all of that. Be free. Be free.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of that resistance to help. I'm always curious about where that comes from. You mentioned that you are a child of immigrants,
Yes.
which I'm so fascinated by.
Yes.
How do you feel like your experience and like I think stepping into a new emotional world, stepping into a different career field that maybe was not accessible to your
Oh yeah.
parents, right? A
Oh
way of
yeah.
life that's
Oh
not
yeah.
accessible. I think the other day you posted something about how your dad was kind of getting on you or joking about how you were traveling.
Oh yes.
Right? It's like
Yeah.
that's just a different life for him. So like how
For
has it been
sure.
kind of being this like, eldest daughter of an immigrant child experience?
When I first started talking to my parents about leaving my job at Bazaar, my dad specifically was like, okay, but you're not going to leave until you have another job lined up, right? And I had to, it took some time, but I had to
Right.
be like, listen, I'm not going to be leaving my job for another job. I
Right.
tried to explain to him what was going on with like Instagram. And, I had told him about, like, he knew that brands had been coming to me. I've been working with them,
Right.
saving up some money on the side because that's how I could afford to leave my job with,
Totally.
without anything lined up was through brand partnerships I was doing on the side, even though it was frowned upon at my company, but that's another conversation for another time.
Absolutely.
And
Well, I
and
love the fact that you did it anyway. I just have to say that.
listen, I was like, I can't let these people stand in the way of my money
Right. No, not your money. And also it seems like your
and my
purpose, right? It's like
life.
you have such a distinct voice and it would
Thank
have been
you.
unfair for them to be able to own that
Yeah.
voice.
Yes, agreed. And so eventually my parents started coming around. But sorry, what else? There was another piece to that question, I think.
Yeah, like
Oh,
how
immigrant
yeah,
parents.
exactly. Like how do they
Oh, and
view
mental health.
and just
Yeah.
accepting help, like learning how to accept help.
Yeah. I definitely think, even when it comes back to the medication conversation, when I first had my panic attack and my parents talked to the school psychologist, they recommended putting me on meds like right away. And my parents were like, oh no, no, she's not going to do that.
Right.
They wanted me to go to therapy first, which is funny because they won't go to therapy themselves.
I
But
was literally about to ask you that. I was curious about their perception. Obviously, you were young and having
yeah,
such
right.
visible reactions
Yeah.
to being mentally unwell or
Yeah.
feeling dysregulated. And I'm sure that they were kind of put into a corner of having to then get
Right.
you help.
Yes.
But like, how do they? The other day, one of my friends who's also a child of immigrants, she was saying that her parents were like, "So are you just telling strangers our business?" Like
Oh.
in reference to
Oh.
being in therapy.
Oh,
So like,
yeah.
how do you
Oh, yeah.
navigate having parents that maybe are resistant to it, and like, how do you also navigate your own personal responsibility? I feel like there's this like hope and joy and grief that goes into being like, I'm the one taking responsibility for my mental health in this family line, in
Yeah.
this lineage. I want you to come with me and often not being received in that. How do you navigate that?
It's so hard. I tried for so long, like, the crying, the screaming,
Yeah.
begging, 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 especially my mom. And my mom has done therapy,
Here and there.
yeah, like years ago, but never consistently and never to like really address, I think, what has happened to her in her
Right.
childhood. It was always kind of like situational. But, you know, sorry, I keep losing my train of thought. I think it's because I
No,
didn't eat a proper
please.
lunch, so I'm like
That's okay. Please
cross-eyed.
take your time.
Um, sorry.
Yeah, of course. No, 100%. How do you feel like,
Yeah,
how do
like
you,
run the
yeah, yeah.
question
How do
back.
you, yeah, totally. That relationship with your mom and trying to help her be a partner in her own healing journey
Oh,
in
right.
tandem with your own.
Yeah. Yeah,
What has that conversation been like?
it's been really hard. My mom has straight up been like, therapy's just not for me.
Yeah.
It's not going to do anything for me. I don't want to, very much like the past is in the past.
Oh,
And
you're like, actually, girl, the past is so present and I am
it
feeling it and
is.
I am paying for it
It is
out of pocket.
so present,
Yeah,
but I
totally.
just kind of had to like let it go. And
Right.
that has also brought me so much peace.
What does that mean, let it go? Do you
Like
mean let go of your responsibility in helping her?
in
Let
yes,
go.
in thinking that I can fix them or that they
Mm,
are gonna get help.
right. Oh, well, do you feel like there's a part of also relinquishing the idea that their help will help you? Like, have you
Yeah,
detached your idea? Like for me, I think I had this like challenge where I just wanted to share. I was like, I feel so free. Like,
right.
I want you guys to feel this too. And specifically as my mom, who like she and I had a very like close and codependent relationship growing up. She had to become a mom. She became a mom very, very young. And I understood that there was kind of like an emotional block that was left there at 20 years old,
Yeah.
19 years old when she became a mother. Right. So I think for me, I was just always like, my growth is going to come when we can feel closer through this healing.
Yeah.
And realizing that that wasn't going to happen was really devastating for me. What was that journey like for you?
I think the hardest thing is actually just finding acceptance for
Mm,
where people are at. Whether it's
yes,
your parents, your friends, your lover, etc. That is where like the peace lies because we can't
absolutely.
change people
You can't.
no matter how much we think we can. Like
Right.
I've even tried the like, if you don't go to therapy, like we can't have a relationship and
It's like, that's not a boundary, girl. That's just control.
right.
Right.
And yeah,
100%.
I've tried that on my mom before and she's like, "Well, she's like I have to respect like
Right.
your decision to
This
not have
is
a
your
relationship
journey.
with me."
Exactly. You're like, oh, I didn't see it going this
No,
way. I didn't
no.
see it going this way.
No, no.
And I love that because it's like then you resign yourself, you surrender to the idea that these are actually like people. These
Yeah.
are people that are a part of your life and they have their own stories and their own limitations in the same ways that we do.
Yeah.
And like our work is for us. And
Yeah.
I
I
feel like
know.
I experience that so much in all of your work and namely definitely in the intimacy that you share with your readership in your newsletter is it feels like you're doing everything for you and for the ability to connect in the ways that you do.
Yeah.
And that's like not only so poignant, but also feels very like aspirational. I think
Thanks.
for the average person who's kind of stepping in to the work themselves and wanting to free themselves from like the dogmatic ideas about what self-love looks like and what
Right.
healing looks like. And
Yeah.
you're just doing it your own way and kind of letting us go up this mountain of life with you,
Yeah.
which feels so special. One as somebody who's such a prolific storyteller, I'm curious about like the stories that you tell yourself about who you are
Mm,
and kind of like what this next vision or version of Chrissy is.
I know.
You did I saw that you wrote something on your 30s around your
So,
37th
yeah.
birthday where you talked
Yeah.
about kind of the story that you're releasing, namely in connection to love and the way
Yeah.
that you express love and receive it
Yeah.
and kind of what it looks like.
Yeah.
Um, I
And
want to hear.
that's what I've written on literally every birthday newsletter. So much of my existence is tied to romantic love. It's really crazy.
Well, you're a
And I don't
Pisces.
yeah, and I'm a Pisces Venus.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, it's just natural.
It's so fucking crazy and I think I tried to hide that part of myself for a very long
Yeah.
time because I never wanted people to know that that's what I wanted
Wanted.
and couldn't have.
Well, I feel like okay, I want to tap into couldn't have.
Right.
I want to tap into couldn't have. I feel so similarly, which is why that was really such a poignant piece for me. Like I feel like I can access love in so many ways.
Yeah.
Like I can access love through creativity and through communal care and through friendship and like I know that I am a walking expression of love in so many ways. And I
Mhm.
think it was really hard in all of the girl bossery of the early 2000s to like get a word in edgewise when you're a lover girl and for it to not feel like in this black and white dissonance with being somebody who is fiercely independent
Yeah.
and who can do things by yourself, but ultimately you want to be loved with
Yeah.
and in a
Yeah.
connection with somebody else.
Yeah.
Like, how has it felt to be able to express that and to change that narrative?
I think so I have this belief, well, I don't think it's just me, but with the things that we feel insecure about, the more we hide it, the more power it has over us.
Hmm.
And that is really the approach that I think I've taken to my newsletter, because I've written some deeply, deeply personal stories on there
Totally.
that sometimes I'm like, I can't believe I'm actually like writing this and telling people this and
A vulnerability
putting
hangover.
it on, yeah, on the
Yeah.
internet. But I'm writing about it to set myself fucking free.
Yes. What we name no longer has the power to hold us back. And that's why language is so powerful. And being a master of language is such a
Yeah.
gift.
Absolutely. And then I can see through the response I get from my newsletter is that in my attempt to set myself free, I'm also setting others
Right.
free. Because there's, we have all these experiences that we think are so unique. We're the only
Totally.
ones to ever go through it. And
Absolutely.
then we're steeped in like shame and
Yes.
embarrassment. And
Yes.
so that's why, I wanted to write about I lost my virginity when I was 25 years old,
Right.
which I don't even think is that crazy, but for a lot of other Americans, that
Yeah.
sounds like, "Oh my god,
Right.
like you're a grandma,"
Totally.
you
One, a lot
know?
of that is like because of the stories that were sold,
Right.
right? Like the media,
Yes.
it's like we're watching 30-year-old people portray 17-year-olds in Euphoria and they're
I
all
can't watch.
catching dick left, right, and center. I'm
I
like,
know.
babe, as for me, I was at the statewide SCA conference with a stick up my ass demanding votes at 17.
Oh, I
I
love that
was
for
not, do you know what
you.
I'm saying? Oh yeah, babe. I was full like 80 Bryant or not 80 Bryant. What's her name? Beanie Feldstein and Booksmart. I
Oh,
was very much her
wow.
vibe and
Yeah.
insufferable in every way. And ambitious to the point of my own
Oh, yes,
demise.
Cap Rising.
Exactly, to my own demise for sure. And yeah, I think that like I have also kind of seen that shift in my life and the ability to eventually just own the fact that like I don't want to be this infallible person,
Yeah,
right? And I think that that's once we release ourselves from that, it's such a beautiful gift to be able to now hand that to somebody else.
for
Like
sure.
at the expense of our own vulnerability and having a vulnerability hangover and also the fear and the courage that comes with being able to tell that story because you know that it'll be of value to somebody and just trusting that.
Absolutely. And that's why I do what I do, because I've come to realize that like it's actually not even about me anymore. It's
Totally.
really not. It's like I am just the vessel to help others, you know?
Totally, you are.
And
Yeah.
I think that, I'm sure so many people look at me and are probably like, "Oh my god, Chrissy puts like all her business on the internet and whatnot." And there's actually something in my birth chart that I've read on the Channy app that is like you're really good at being vulnerable or making people like believe that you're
That you're vulnerable.
vulnerable. And I think it's a mix of both, but I think
Totally.
no matter what I've written and shared, I'm like,
Yes.
there's still probably a few layers deeper that I
Right.
haven't shared because I do have to keep some stuff to
There are
myself.
always things that there is sacred work that we have to spare for ourselves because that's what
Absolutely.
makes us a person and not something to eat. Like not an eternal feast to eat from. Like we're a
Right. But
person.
I can
Yeah.
tap into the aspects of my experience that I know others are going to relate to.
Exactly. And I find as a storyteller, I also have learned to trust that the reason why I'm ready to share it is because it's time to share. And also
Yes.
doing a really active check-in
Yeah.
about that. It's like you're going to be really, really vulnerable right now. Are you doing this and do you feel safe with a combative, adversarial, or dissonant response?
Yeah.
Will you feel safe with that? Because
Right.
ultimately it's like the more that you share, the more likely you are to create friction other people because you're
Yeah.
going to like challenge. I think I feel this a lot with your work. It's like
Yeah.
you're going to challenge things that people maybe haven't had the strength or the capacity to dive into for
For
themselves, right?
sure.
And so it's like you're not going to get for me, I've been really lucky in that the majority of my feedback tends to be positive.
Same.
And I trust that
Always.
that's just like there's
Yes.
divine intervention there to some
Yes.
extent, right?
Yes.
But it's
Yes.
like every once in a while I'll have somebody where I'm like, you fucker. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, can't you just tell that I am trying to be a sweetie pie and I'm trying to like own this part of myself? And it took a lot for me.
Yeah.
And I realize it also takes a lot for them. Like
Yeah.
for the ears and eyes that eventually receive your work, it's like it's gonna take a lot from them to even want to show up to that newsletter and show up to that
Oh,
piece of work that you're sharing. And
absolutely.
like it's not always gonna be, like roses and sunshine. Not everybody's
No.
gonna be ready to receive it. I'm
Right.
curious about I want to dive back into your kind of transformation in the language and understanding and practice of love.
Yeah.
How has being able to own the fact that you want and are deserving of love and that coming into a romantic relationship is something that you desire, how has finally owning that both personally and publicly transformed your connections and your way of dating?
I think it just allows me to be more honest and upfront. I think I
What does that
was
look like? Do you say like I am ready for romantic partnership?
so I guess it depends. But I think, in the past, I think I was I'm such a Pisces, but like I think throughout like my 20s, especially maybe into my early 30s, I was very good at victimizing myself and not
Mhm.
really owning the fact that like I was emotionally unavailable. I was
Yes.
playing games. Like I wasn't being
Yes.
upfront, or I was like purposefully trying to hurt people,
Totally.
And
So that
so,
they would want you or become, like, enraged enough to chase after you.
right.
Yeah.
And so then, I think it's helped me to just be more honest with myself because, yeah, like I do want a relationship. And I think it just also affects how I look at someone else's actions and how they're
Mm.
showing up or not showing up for me
Totally.
because now I'm like, yeah, as much as this could be really fun, this is not going to give me what I ultimately deserve. Like I
Yes.
just went through that a few weeks ago. I had like two great dates with a guy in 1 week and we were supposed to see each other and then, he like didn't follow up with me and there was a part of me that was like, I know I could text this motherfucker and he would text me back and it would be like everything
Right.
is fine, fine, fine and we would probably like hang out again if I
Totally.
pushed it, but I'm like, why would I do that?
Right. And, like, what am I telling myself by pushing it? Right?
Right.
Like, my therapist and I do a lot of work where, A, she's held a mirror to my face very similarly to what you've shared. um in that she was like, here's the thing, if you are consistently choosing emotionally unavailable people, it's because you are not available to the love that you're actually looking for.
Yeah,
Otherwise you
I
would choose people
know.
who were available
That
because that's
was
clear to you.
it was so hard for me to
Yes,
understand, so
totally.
hard.
But one thing I did love about those several conversations that my therapist and I had was that she also reminded me that I do actually inherently know what availability looks like. I'm
Yeah,
turning my back to it.
yeah,
And that kind of places the power back into my own hands versus
yeah,
being in that victimization that I was in,
yeah.
which is like love evades me. Love
Right,
escapes me. I'll never
right,
have it. I'm alien to it. I don't
right.
understand it. And instead it's like, no, you actually are seeing it. You just are not choosing it. And let's talk about why.
Yeah,
I'm curious about how the love that you're looking for differs from the versions of love that you saw growing up, whether it's with your own parents or like family members or extended adults, or even in like stories that you read or
I
media that you
know,
consumed. Like,
I
how
know.
was the love that you're looking for? How does that differ?
Oh, yeah, because you mentioned, something earlier about, like, the media I was consuming. Oh my god, I was like, the rom-coms,
Right.
this idea that, like, the guy is supposed to chase after you and that there's supposed to
Totally.
be a struggle. I think
Yes.
that
The push
was
and pull, the runner chaser dynamic. It's
yes.
dark. That's dark information. Well, because I think the romantic in us, and I know you're a romance queen, right? Like it took me a long time. The day that I decided that I was in fact ready for romantic partnership was also the day that I decided that it was okay that I was a romantic.
Yeah.
And I was like, everybody around me was like, yeah, bitch, obviously. Like I had never owned that. I was like,
Yeah,
and in the meantime, I'm like creating all these like dreamy experiences for the people that I love and like
right.
showing up for romance in my own life. Like I
Yeah.
romance myself, right? And
Yes,
so
of course.
it's like, yeah, bitch, of course you're romantic. But I realized that there was a part of me which I also was challenged to accept, which was like, I am waiting for the knight in shining armor. And like, where did that
Yeah,
come from?
yeah,
Like, not necessarily that this person was a man or would like save me from any like very obvious reality,
yeah,
but that I was still looking for somebody to kind of break down these walls that I myself had to break down.
yeah. I know. I think there's still that part of me that, wants someone to really show me that I'm worthy.
Yes. Yes.
That I won't know that I'm truly worthy
Right.
until that
Right.
person shows up. There is
Totally.
still, like this shit is like so
What do you think
hardwired.
is what do you think is standing of the in the way of that worthiness? Like what are the experiences or thought patterns or voices that come back to you where you're like, I'm not getting this because X?
I know. Um,
Like, I know you've mentioned your independence before.
yeah, yes. I mean, I think listen, it's like you're a Black woman, you grow up
Yes.
in New York. I have
Yes.
immigrant parents. It's again, like so much of that is just like hardwired in me. I take pride in that I'm independent and I can do shit, and
Mhm.
I can travel around the world by myself. I'm not scared to be by myself. Like
Right.
I value those things a lot. But yeah, it's like I do also want someone who's really gonna show up for me, and I want someone who's gonna want to travel with me and just and know that I'm as magical as I truly know that I am deep down.
Totally. Totally. Absolutely. When you say earlier, you mentioned that this was something that you
Can't
can't
have,
have.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I was speaking in the past tense,
Yeah,
and
of course.
that's what I
100%.
thought I couldn't have. Yeah. Because I just
And what do
thought
you
there
think has
was
shifted?
um
Like, what work have you been presented with, or what thought patterns do you think you've
I
inserted into your life that
well,
made you realize you can have it? It's just not here.
I think that it was a lot of like trauma work that kind of helped me to see. I think it's like a mix of like understanding like attachment, trauma, my own family history, like generational trauma.
Right.
I have like such a deep abandonment wound, and I'm like, this shit
Mm.
does not belong to me. It really doesn't. It really doesn't,
No,
because
you inherited it.
I did.
Yeah.
And there are so many examples in my family's lineage where
Right.
people were abandoned by
Mm.
their parent or whatever.
Partner?
So, cuz I'm like it's so like deeply ingrained in me, and I think I've had two real like dating experiences in the last 2 years that I think have really helped to shift things for me, because I have anxious attachment. And
Mhm.
so it's like the agony that I've put myself through. And like sometimes when people are going through a tough time or whatever, you're like, how bad does it have to get until you can finally decide to
Yes.
choose differently? And I
Totally.
think that was also such a light bulb that went off when I realized that, oh, I actually have to make a conscious effort to
Right.
go against what I think I want and what feels good to me in order
Yes.
to like bypass this shit, because
Totally. There's active choice happening. It's not like it's just going to go away, or
right.
like the burden's gonna like just disseminate, just drop off of you.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think that's what I thought, or that like, okay, well, when the right person shows up, then it won't feel this bad, or I won't feel this
Mm.
anxious. Cause I do think, listen, it can go either way, but I do think even when we're in a great partnership, we can still get activated.
Well, actually, I think you will.
Yeah.
I think that is part of the black and white thinking that we have
Yeah.
to abandon entirely, is this
Yeah.
idea that when love comes, true love, like all encompassing, accepting, witnessing love, that will no longer be anxious. But
Yeah.
I have experienced, even in context of my best friendships,
Mm.
that being truly loved and seen by them activated a sense of insecurity in me that I had never felt before. And that's because I was actually being seen. Even when I was
Mm.
saying, doing nothing, and when I was not even in front of them, they knew who I was.
I love
And
that.
that has, of course, like come to define the kind of romantic partnership that I'm looking for, as somebody who's not partnered and who hasn't really. My therapist and I have finally come to terms. She kind of helped me face this. Like, I realized that I'd never been in love before.
Yeah.
I've been
Same.
in a lot of runner chaser dynamics. I've been in a lot
Same.
of experiences where I felt so deeply that I
Same.
love somebody.
Same.
And then when I
Same.
walked away, like, I remember even having like my last relationship that I got out of in 2020 with somebody who was like a very volatile and unkind person, that he would always say, like, you don't love me. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, I've never felt so strongly, and I'm dedicating so much to this relationship, and like, you are horrible to me. So it's really interesting that you're saying this, because you're
Right.
making it kind of hard, but also I'm still here. But now that I look back on it, I'm like, you're right. Like, I didn't even like you.
Oh,
But I
I
thought I
know.
wanted to be there. I thought I wanted to be there so badly, because ultimately I wanted to receive the love that was coming, that I thought could come from him, and in pursuit of just simply trying to have it. Like, I still wanted the conquest in my own way.
Yeah.
And
Are you an anxious attachment
I
girly?
am.
Yeah.
I am. I'm an anxious attachment girly. That's exactly right. And I have a deep abandonment wound as well, as somebody who grew up watching these like really, really strong and generous and kind and soft matriarchs in my family be abandoned time and time again
Yeah.
by the men that they chose.
Yeah.
I just kind of thought that abandonment was my birthright.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to also kind of release that baggage and realize like it's overdue. Like, check it back where you picked it up from. It's not my business anymore. That was a huge challenge for me. But coming to terms with the fact that I actually had not seen it before, I had to look towards other examples. And I
Yeah.
realized that like
Where did you find those examples? Because I'm still looking.
well, you know what? You know what? For the most part, I was actually about to ask you, but for the most part, I feel like I've seen it most in my friendships because they do
Right.
love me
Yeah.
in a way that I didn't even actually feel like I even accessed from like my parents. Like, as much
Yeah.
as they love me in their own ways,
Right.
right? Like, if we're really tapping into love, like a la Bell Hooks, it's like they can't witness me though in the way that I need right now, in the way that I
Yeah.
envision myself.
Yeah.
And that's their limitation that I've come to accept.
Mm-hmm.
But I really, really have seen it in these other ways, and it has triggered me.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that like I think ultimately speaks to that lack of emotional availability, is like
For sure.
maybe what you fear most is actually having love and
Right.
knowing that this person will see you
Oh, of course.
in these like intimate, safe, and independent parts of yourself.
Yeah.
Like, now you'll be witnessing those things. And
Right.
I'm
'Cause-
like,
Yeah, because also like one of my deepest, darkest fears is to find that love, and then one day that person like wakes up and says they don't love me anymore, or just like something happens. Like,
right.
that's
The
truly my
unforeseen.
worst. Like, to me, that's like always been my
Thank
worst
you for
nightmare.
naming that. Thank you for naming that.
Mhm.
I think that that's like, I really resonate with that as somebody who is really complex. Like, I know that about myself. Like, there are layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. And
Oh yeah.
I'm also creating them, right? And that's what
Yeah.
we do in doing the work and being a dynamic person, is you're
Yes.
creating so much space for yourself to transform and to become. And you know that there's gonna come a time where somebody will have to see you in that. And like then they'll have to see the messy work, the root work that I'm doing actively. And I'm like, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
get out. I'm in my enclosure. I'm in my enclosure. I'm having independent playtime in my enclosure. Please not come in here. You know? And I'm like, I feel like you're somebody who also has that space, that independent space that you're doing the work in. It's very
Yes.
scary.
Which I also think is interesting, because like when you look at my birth chart, I have a lot of markers in my chart that says like monogamy is not for me, actually. But
do you feel that way? And what would that look like for you to step into that?
I know. I don't know, because the Pisces Venus is very strong. I'm curious about how
And when you say
I
Pisces
will,
Venus, you mean like you want that dreamy, like man woman
right,
vibe.
yes, and I think that I'm very curious to see what it will be like when I'm in a like stable partnership, if I'm actually gonna feel
Like
bored,
you
and
you want that.
will I actually want it when it's there in in a
Right.
safe way? Because I'm so used to that
Wow.
feeling of anxiety and needing to
Yes.
attach to someone because I'm worried that they're going away.
Right. And
But what
maybe
happens
it's
when they're actually there?
okay, that's iconic. So what you're saying is like maybe actually the attachment, the desire for attachment is putting you in a position where you may actually be dreaming of something that you don't really want. Like, your desire may not rest in that like monogamous, we're together for forever, it's just the two of us. Which, to be fair, I'd imagine if you continue to do your work, like of course your desires are going to shift and going to change, and like
Right.
maybe that's also a part of the journey. I think
For
about that a
sure.
lot with myself, where I'm like, I have this idea of what the landscape of love will look like, and maybe I'll frolic in that and still want something more because I'm a wanter, and
Yeah.
I'll always want something
Yes.
more,
Yes.
right? And that's just a part of it.
Yeah.
So I want to dip into your dreaminess a little bit,
Yeah.
because I know you're such a dreamer. what does what does dream Chrissy look like? What does dream Chrissy in love look like? Like, how do you,
Oh my
when you're
God.
like, for me, I will sit and journal like
Yeah.
every experience that I think I'll have with a future
Oh,
partner or person. Yeah,
wow.
I will say, and I will think about like how we're gonna meet. Like, we're in a room and I'm invited to a friend's house and like they weren't supposed to come, but they ended up being able to come. And then we had this talk. And
Oh,
then
I
like,
love
oh yeah,
this.
I'll
Okay,
get into it.
this is homework for me because I've never done that. But things cross my I'm a very powerful manifester, and I will
I
say
see that.
when I went to London last year, literally the first like week I was there, I met someone who I ended up dating throughout the summer,
Oh, that's hot and steamy. And the
but
girls weren't seeing that on Instagram. The girls weren't seeing that on
no,
Instagram.
no. I have Scorpio. Scorpio rules my seventh house. And
Oh,
I've
that's
read
right.
that whatever house rules Scorpio is actually what you should kind of keep
Keep
to
closest.
yourself. So
Yeah.
even though I do obviously write a lot about relationships, it's usually like in hindsight. I'm never gonna be
Actively.
I'm never
Totally.
gonna be giving
Yeah.
y'all like minute to minute updates. But I can't remember if this is before I had the first date with the guy. I think it within that time, but I was walking by a park one day and I was like, no, I think it was before I met him. I'm walking by a park one day and I see like a couple just like laying in the grass on a blanket. And I was
Right.
like, I hope I get to do that or something like that. And then literally 2 weeks later, after my second date with this guy,
Right.
we ended up like we both went home that night and then we met back up the next day and we went to Hyde
Wow.
Park and laid in the grass and like listened to music and it was just it was
That's
so
beautiful.
cute.
Well, and that I feel like has that taught you about the necessity of like specificity in what you're trying to manifest?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I mean it definitely obviously it definitely helps. Like yeah, there are so many other I remember once I had journaled about how I really wanted to like meet a guy that I could like go out dancing with. And I don't know how soon thereafter, I think it was probably like within a few months, I like reconnected with this guy that I had gone on a first date with 3 years prior. But then he got into a serious relationship. I run into him. He had just come out of that
no way.
relationship. We bumped into each other on the street and we literally went out
Meet
dancing.
cute.
Yes.
Stop.
Yes. It was kind of like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I was with a friend and he was like, "Oh, I was going to go to this place. I think they were having like a reggae night or something like that." And
And you just said yes?
yeah.
It's so amazing to me as somebody who's like actively moving through like anxiety and like a history of really fraught, mental illness, that like you're able to just accept yes in the way that you do. Like, you feel so free. And I know there's so much like deeply like heavy burdensome work on the back end to create that, not only vision but like that reality for
Yeah.
yourself. And I think that's so commendable. It's so beautiful that you
Thanks.
get to have that.
I think my anxiety is mainly rooted in things that make me feel out of control, like getting on an airplane.
Right.
So, when it comes to like social
Spontaneity.
things and spontaneity, it's not so present. Like sometimes, sure, like when I get invited on trips, like and it feels last minute and it requires me getting on the plane, I'm kind of like,
Totally.
do I don't know. Like planning plane trips for me sometimes is a lot
Right.
of spinning in circles.
Right.
Um but yeah, I mean, my sun, Venus, Jupiter, 11th house, girl. I'm
Right.
all about friends and community.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I'm so excited for this next foray into love and what that looks like for you. I think that there's like a
Thanks.
lot of surprises to
Yeah,
be had.
I think so. I'm about to get eclipsed in my seventh house on Friday. So
That's right, the Scorpio eclipse. Scorpio moon eclipse.
yes,
That's
yeah.
that's wild.
I have my north node is Taurus. So
Yeah.
I've been
Oh, your
getting
north
hit.
you have a first house north node.
Yeah,
That's main character energy.
conjunct my ascendant.
Yeah, that's
I'm actually 0 degrees north node. Isn't that
that's
crazy?
that's
I
major
know.
main character. For those of you who don't know, what this means, your north node is quintessentially, or what they say in like this blanket statement, it's like your soul's purpose.
Yeah.
But more deeply, it's also about kind of the tools and the energy that you should you have to learn how to step into in order to feel and aligned with purpose.
Yeah.
And your ascendant is like your persona, your sense of identity, your hero's journey. And for Chrissy, hers is defined by Taurus, which is
Yep.
ruled by Venus,
Yep.
which is like all
Clever
things,
girl.
all things Venusian, love,
Yes.
relationships, connection, things,
Beauty.
food that tastes good, perfumes that
Yeah.
smell good, all things sensory. I have a Taurus moon, so I know it well. And I've
Love
got
it.
like a stellium, like all of my stuff is in my second house.
Oh.
Yeah, as a Capricorn rising, then the next house is Aquarius, and I'm Aquarius out.
Oh.
I've got Aquarius energy in spades.
Oh, I
So
love
I'm
that.
I'm very Taurian in my own way.
Ugh, I love astrology so much.
Yeah, me too. I think, I've noticed that a lot of people who feel isolated or alien from versions of themselves and other people for times in their life tend to gravitate toward spiritual languages.
Yeah.
Because I want to be known in the same way that I desire to know others.
Yes,
And so I
for
feel like it just
sure.
helps me do that. Do you feel similarly?
Oh, yes. I think, yes, in the attempt to understand others, it's really that you want to understand yourself more. And
Yes.
I've been into astrology since I was a kid. That was another thing for me.
Yeah, me
Buying
too.
crystals. I have a 15-year-old niece who's a Pisces, and her affinity for crystals and
Does that
astrology,
feel like
like
such
I
a great
waited for
mirror?
it to come out before I started really nurturing
Yeah.
it. But I'm just like,
And now you're watering it.
you can't make this shit up.
No, you can't. No, you
You
can't.
really
That's the thing.
can't.
Once you like actually deep dive, you're like, it's real. Like, and
Yes.
also like I'm an Aquarius. I'll put my 10 hat on fucking any day. I don't need anybody to believe it to believe it.
No.
That's one
Oh,
thing. That
no.
is one thing about me and my Aquarius ass journey is I will believe it alone. I will believe it alone.
Oh my God, absolutely.
I know I really, really love that because I feel like in that way you've taken on these languages and now you transform them into something that's more accessible. Like
Yeah,
I love
for
that you
sure.
will actively reference astrology in your work, but at the same
Yeah.
time you'll use language that is not actively astrology related to describe things that are going on.
Yeah.
I do something very similarly in a way to like just kind of I just want to put it in there. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like scam people into being into astrology a little bit.
Right. And I also think, listen, as much as I love spirituality, I think I also have a very rational mind, and I can sit in the minds of the people who maybe are more skeptic, or even when it
Totally.
comes to manifestation, like obviously manifestation is amazing and I love
Right.
it, but there's also a lot of people who cannot access that.
No, absolutely not. For
And people
very
who look
literal
like
reasons.
yes,
Yeah,
and people who look like
that's
us.
right.
You know,
Right.
so I always want to be mindful when I'm talking about it.
Right.
I don't want people to ever think like, oh, well, this just isn't working out for you because you haven't done your
That's
shadow
not what
work
we're
and because
doing.
you're not,
No.
believing in yourself and
Totally.
you're not manifesting the right way.
Right.
But these are tools that if you are able to access them,
Yes.
they can
Yes.
help you.
100%. Well, and I think that we find that language a lot in very like white supremacist new age spirituality.
Exactly. And it's so
right?
hard to, do you feel that way actually? That like,
Oh yeah.
I don't ever want to be like
No.
looped in with them.
No, I feel that way constantly. But I think that that's also why I really love to talk about, namely with other Black women, the
Yeah.
fact that like ritual and spirituality and connection to ancestry is actually our birthright. Like that was what
1,000%.
right, like that's what we were and do continue to do when white supremacy is not invading our space. Like
Yep.
and this is not a no-go to Christianity at all, but
Right,
Christianity is a tool of white supremacy and has
Yes.
been notoriously. And that doesn't mean that it is for you.
Right.
But that is the history, and we can't wipe that away. Like
Agreed.
before Christianity invaded our space, we were venerating ancestors and we were
Yes.
practicing ritual
Yep.
and we were identifying planetary alignment. Like we were
Yep.
using these things, and Christianity still uses those things. Actually,
Yeah.
the Pope has an astrologer.
Mm.
Like that has always been everybody has an astrologer. And
Yeah.
so I love being a Black woman who gets to share that with the world in ways that are more accessible
Yes.
and with other Black women
Yes.
in a
for
way
sure.
that is not simply condemning them to, well, I'm so sorry that systemic oppression isn't working for me, but maybe if you manifested, maybe if you got some rose quartz, that would help. You should get some carnelian. I think that'll help. It's so insufferable.
Yeah. So I always try to be mindful of that because I'm like, I don't ever want people to think that I am sitting in the same space as those
Right,
people.
exactly. That's not me. Totally. With that being said, to wrap up with a few questions, I
Yeah.
did want to hear in your own words how you have used spirituality and spiritual practice to kind of define yourself for yourself, and like how that differs from maybe the role, how the way that you view your current role in life, in your own personal journey, and also externally, how that differs from the one that you were maybe raised to fulfill.
Oh. I think I've found so much. I think spirituality has just really affirmed who I've always known myself to be. I
Mm.
think that
And who is
there's
that?
um
Powerful for sure.
I guess I think ju- I hate to say it, but like the word just like magic.
Say that. Yes, say that.
That's I really truly feel like I am magical, that
You are.
I really truly believe in myself, and that I'm
Yes.
able to achieve all that I want in this life.
Yes.
I made a video once about like imposter syndrome. I'm like, no, 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 no. I don't ever want to hear
No,
that.
I'm in Delulu land when
I
it comes to
don't
imposter syndrome. I'm in
ever
Delulu land.
want to hear that phrase. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I'm just like, I deserve to be anywhere that I want
Want
to
to
be.
be.
Point blank.
I love
And if
that.
I make it into a room, into a space, I'm not going to question whether I deserve to
No,
be
I'm
there. Are you
here. I'm
insane?
present. I'm here. That's exactly right.
That's crazy to me. Crazy town.
That's
But
actually also that's actually also quite, I always say, like, I know for a fact that I was a straight cisgendered white man in at least one former lifetime, because that's how I've come to navigate the world. I've always been intrinsic. I've actually always been naturally that way. I'm like, I deserve everything that I want. And even when I was working through deservedness, beneath the surface in some ways, I've never really, really allowed a door to be shut on me.
yeah,
It, unless I was choosing to walk
right.
away from the door itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very much in
I
a
love it. You're a magician. You're magical. You're a fairy princess.
I
You're
am.
everything.
Yes, and I'm very much a, like, if you hear no, it's because you're asking the wrong person.
Yes. You're like, I'll go ask somewhere else.
Yeah,
Totally.
1,000%.
100%.
Not letting anyone stand in my way.
How do you feel
But
like that differs from what you knew, or what you were raised to
well,
understand about yourself?
I actually think it just confirmed what I always
Mm,
thought. But I think I had this thing where, also because probably because I grew up in predominantly white spaces, that even in terms of my own attractiveness, I was like, I knew that I found myself attractive. Sure, I get compliments from strangers, but sometimes it felt like no one else could see it.
yes. 100%. You're like, how is it? Like, I feel like I'm being gaslighted. Like, the world is gaslighting me because I'm looking and I feel like I'm eating, bitch. 4 + 4 = 8. And that's what I'm seeing right now. That's what I'm seeing right now. But everybody else is quiet. It's quiet for me. I had a very similar
And even
experience.
just as I said earlier, that even when I was in high school, I had this feeling like I'm meant to do really great things. And yeah, I think when you're a kid, you're just like, okay, I hope that to be true, or
Totally.
you just don't really know what to make sense of it,
Right.
but you know that that is sort of like the driving force.
Yeah.
But then when I really got when I first got my birth chart read, I'm like, oh, so that's where this is coming from. That's where this
Right.
drive is coming from. That's why my whole existence feels connected to love. Like, that's why I find it so easy to make friends. Like, that's actually
Yeah.
something that I've really come to accept in the last few years as I've gotten further with my astrology studies, is just like, people will sometimes write to me like, "Oh, how do you make friends as an adult? And I'm having a really hard
Mhm.
time." And I'm like, I truly can't relate. I have a very easy time connecting with other people.
Right.
And again, my sun, my Venus, and my Jupiter is in the 11th house, which is
Right.
of friendship and community.
That's the house of mass community. It's ruled by Aquarius.
Yes, yes, it
Yes.
is. And so that's just never been an issue for me.
Totally.
And I feel like I know how to be a good friend, and I take pride in that.
Mm. And I love that you focus so much on innate gifts, because I think that that's
Yes.
something, we're so obsessed with like the binary of rags to riches. I was nothing and I had nothing and now I'm everything. And I think that people rarely hear somebody who has been so fortified in a sense of self, at least to some level, to some instinctual level for their entire lives. And that is something that I myself often find like I don't often hear an echo of, that I
Yeah.
experience in my own journey, in my own humanity. Is I'm like, I've actually known a lot of things about myself. And that's what I'm hoping other people soon come to understand about themselves, and what I think that you're really offering the people who are, graced, with the true honor of being able to read your work and to experience you, is like they get to hear this knowing. And the fact that like if they really, really sat with themselves, if they sat with themselves for just a time, they would know that they've always known,
Absolutely.
and that they don't have to look externally. Like there are signs of that in our inner child work, which you mentioned earlier. And like just being able to observe what you've always loved. If you just look at that and you focus on that and you remain in Delulu land for all external voices, you'll feel so secure in that understanding.
I agree. And that is also, again, something that astrology has really given me is the acceptance around, okay, I am gifted in these areas. And
Totally.
and the places where I'm challenged, where maybe I perceived that as a
Right.
weakness, that's actually just part of my lesson
Yes.
during this lifetime. I have
Absolutely.
Saturn in my 7th house. Like that
Right.
means you are gonna, marry later in life, have
Yes.
issues around relationships,
Like
and
post 30.
even
Yeah.
and even just understanding that, I
Is
think took a
acceptance.
lot of pressure off of me.
Yes. I love that. I feel like you have this energy and this belief that is you have not stated but is felt, in that you are supposed to feel ease, like you're destined for ease, a certain level of ease, which is very like Taurus rising for anybody who understands it.
Yes, it
It's very Taurus
is.
rising, and like you get to move and be in your own time. You can't be forced out of your own time. Um what would you say, do you feel like that's a part of your superpower? And if not, what do you think is your superpower? What do you think is your birthright? What do you think it is that you want, the specific magic that you want or know you'll be seen for?
I definitely think vulnerability is my superpower, and
Period.
I think I'm a truth teller. I just recently connected to the fact that when I was a kid, everyone in my family would always get mad at me. Well, mainly my brothers, and would call me a tattletale.
Yes,
And, there's always this idea of keeping secrets and don't tell mom this,
totally.
don't tell dad that, etc. And I would always get in trouble. And what I
Yes.
really realized, literally just like 2 weeks ago, they were mad at me because I'm a truth teller.
That's exactly right. 100%. And they fear it. Esther Perel,
We love.
in a conversation that she had with Brene Brown Unlocking, on her podcast Unlocking, she was talking about how the reason why being a truth teller is so burdensome is because we show up after this long line and lineage and pattern of people being fearful of what they have to release when the truth is told, right?
Hmm.
Like we're at that point, have already fully bought into the idea that deception is their protection.
Yes.
Right?
Oh
And
my
so
God.
when the
So
truth teller
true.
enters the room, they know now that they're no longer protected by deception, whatever way that looks like, right?
Yeah.
Like this isn't, when we say deception, it's not just like,
Sometimes it's just denial.
that's exactly right. In denial itself, 100% completely. And like we have seen that in the resilience of so many people, right? Like for example, like you come from an immigrant family. I'd imagine that there's a lot of denial that has to exist
Huh.
in order to transform
Yes.
that one timeline of realities
Yep.
from being a physical and cultural distinctive situation
Yeah.
and shifting into another one,
Yeah.
right? It's like that is something that has to be true for you. You have to kind of not tell the truth.
Right.
Um and you talk about a history of abandonment and all these things, and it's like for you now, it's like you get to tell the truth because you're walking in it.
Yeah.
which is so
Absolutely.
beautiful,
I
so
know,
gorgeous.
especially the way you say it.
Thank you. Well, I mean, like, I feel grateful to observe it. I feel grateful to observe it. So to wrap up, if you were to name 5 ingredients that exist in the recipe for being a cycle breaker, for being somebody who tells their own story, what would that be? What would those be?
Honesty, integrity, courage.
I love it. Do you think
Mm,
magic's in there?
there's a little magic. There's a little magic in there. Sprinkle, sprinkle. I just learned what that meant on TikTok.
Oh, sprinkle, sprinkle.
Yeah.
I love her.
I know.
I love me a
Oh
bit
my
of her.
God.
I love me a bit of her. And you know what? The second that anybody says that they're not with Miss Sprinkle Sprinkle, I said, you are not for me. Because I'm a motherfucking city girl.
She's amazing.
She's amazing.
She's
telling the truth.
amazing.
Talk about truth teller. She's telling the truth.
She really is. And what I think I need one more. What else? Optimism.
I love that.
That's something I've also
hope.
come to
I
really
love
accept about
that.
myself is that I'm an optimist.
That's gorgeous.
Because
we
I
don't have
think-
enough of those.
I think we have been taught that optimism means you're happy all the time, and
Right.
it doesn't. It means that you know that you have the tools to get through whatever
Right.
it is you need to get through.
I love that. That's exactly right. There's a lot of self-trust embedded in that, and also
Yeah.
collective trust. I feel that similarly. Where like I'm like I actually like I have seen not only like we're always processing so much trauma and so
Yeah.
much crazy shit, and we're always going to have adulthood is just a slew of like small fires everywhere all the time.
Mhm.
And at the same time, like we have built-in resilience. And when I say that, I don't mean that we get to take the most amount of challenge. What I say is that, like, to your point, it's like we actually are born with the tools to be able to show up for these challenges. And
Mhm.
like understanding that about ourselves and about the people around us is very, very helpful in this journey, because then you don't become a victim to hopelessness.
Yeah.
And you don't become a victim to your own circumstances.
Absolutely. And I do think there's this weird framing around resilience and, a lot of
Especially as Black women.
Black women who say like, I don't want to be resilient. Like I want to have a soft life and this and that.
Yes.
And I'm resilient and I have a soft life.
Well, to me, they're the same thing. To me,
Like,
they're the
what?
same thing.
Yeah.
Totally. I'm like our inherent gifts, right? To me, are the resilience. That is
Yes.
the ease. I don't have to actually fight anything. Like I had those things before I ever even had the challenges at hand.
Right.
Like I think that I was born into that, and I agree with you. I feel like there is so much healing to be done in what we understand to be our burden and also our gift.
Yeah.
Because all we've been fed is that we're strong.
Yeah.
And so now we're sick of hearing that, even
Yeah.
though it is true.
Right.
Right. It is true.
Yes,
It's
of
just, it's not
course.
the only truth. It's not our wholeness.
Yes.
Right.
Agreed.
And it's like we're deserving of that full scope and that complete pie. And we're going to have it.
We're gonna have it.
We're going to have it.
Absolutely.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Oh my God.
Thank you for joining me.
Yes.
Yeah, you truly, truly are so magical and so special.
Oh my God. I so appreciate you. And I'm really happy
course.
that you had me on today.
Absolutely. I hope to get together soon in both America and London.
Yes.
And we'll make it happen.
Girl. We're taking it international.
Exactly. We sure are. We're taking this on tour. Thank you. Thank you. And we'll see you guys soon. Thank you. This podcast and every episode is produced and edited by Joey Gabala, music by Sufi Hamilton, and of course, the voice of Kendra Austin. See you soon.